Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Heavy Branches. I'm Jacob, and I'm here with my two favorite co-hosts, Jacob Cave and Tanner Dalton. And we are super excited to bring you this week's episode of Heavy Branches. But before we get going with that, Cave, how you been doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Yeah, everything's going well. Trying to think. It's been a couple weeks since we've recorded. So I'm trying to think of what's happened the last 2 weeks. I'm kind of blanking, but I
You're
think
preaching
things.
through Philippians now. Why don't you tell us about that for a second?
Yeah. So, in the month of April, we're doing Philippians. So I just finished the second part of the book of Genesis. So we'll have one more month in Genesis. But Genesis was a lot of fun, and then now starting through Philippians, talking about joy and what it looks like to be joyful in Christ. So it's a topic I really enjoy talking about. So
I would imagine.
yeah. So it's going good. Getting excited. We have 3 more weeks till my wife Megan graduates from college, and so we're getting pumped about that. And when she graduates, we'll be moving full time up to Irvine, Kentucky. So we're really pumped about that. Her graduating and us moving out of Wilmore. So a lot of good things happening. How about you, Jacob? How are you?
Oh, been doing good. A little sad that college basketball's over. I love watching college basketball, and so it's going to be a long, I think, like 7-month wait until that's back. But really enjoyed the March Madness tournament. One of my favorite sporting events in all the year is March Madness. So really enjoyed that. A little sad that it's gone. I'm still preaching through the Book of James. Just started chapter 3 last week, so we're getting close to the end. But not a whole lot new to update on. Tanner, what you been up to?
Well, we didn't record last week because I was sick, so that's on me. I guess Cave and Jacob could have done their first episode, just the two of them, but we didn't think about it till it
Heavy
was
Branches
already.
would not be the same without any of the three of us here.
Listen, one of these days, I think it would be cool for you all to do a
You started
episode,
it
just the two of
without
you.
me. It was the same for
Yeah.
like a year without me.
But we've grown substantially since then in quality because you are here with us, Gabe. So we do not want to remove you.
Yeah, so removing me wouldn't hurt the quality at all. Anyway, so that's why we're delayed a week here. I apologize for that. But better now. We're getting closer to the time where I'm the preacher, and my grandpa will be moving more to well, he's already kind of started more of a full-time position at Louisville Bible College. So, every week is a little bit closer to that, and it's very strange. But I think overall it's been pretty positive. So, but things are going good here.
I may be putting you on the spot here, but do you know when the date of his last sermon there?
May 25th.
Okay, so after that Sunday will be when the process is fully completed, the transition, right?
Yeah, we made sure in our scheduling that he preached the last Sunday morning that he'd be here. So,
Okay.
and I'm excited for that. He always knows how to handle like special occasions like that. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles that one, because I'm sure he'll do great with it. But yeah, I already miss him, and he's not even fully gone yet. So,
That's
I can imagine. He's always a call away, though.
true. Or 5 minutes up the road for right now until they move.
Fair enough.
But
well,
anyway,
as we get going into our episode today, over the last 7 weeks or so, I think 7 weeks, we've been doing our series, Barriers to Bearing Fruit. And so we're kind of wrapped up with that now. So we really hope that was beneficial for you guys. Just something we've consistently hit on through this whole podcast is we want this to motivate you guys and encourage you guys, equip you guys to bear fruit for Christ in your own personal lives and in your own local congregations together with the other Christians there. And so we hope our Barriers to Bearing Fruit series really did help you to do that as you continue to think about different things that stop us from bearing fruit and how we can overcome those. So we're kind of closing the book on that today. And we're going to start our new series today. Something we've done on here quite a bit is going chapter by chapter through books of the Bible. So we did that with Luke and then Acts. So we're going to kind of get back into doing something more like that. We're going to be going back to the Gospels, to the Gospel of John. So today we're not going to get into John chapter 1 so much as it's just going to be an introduction into the Gospel of John. So as we get ready to go into that, Tanner, Cabe, why don't you guys tell us a few reasons why we chose to go through John and maybe what you're most looking forward to in the Gospel of John.
Go ahead, Cabe.
Well, I was going to say, go ahead, Tanner. No, that's fine. Well, we're choosing John. For one reason is we really enjoyed going through, what did we go through? Luke, when you first started. We wanted to go through a book in the New Testament, we're talking about bearing fruit, but we didn't want to do the other two Gospels because there would have been similar things that you cover. But John is not I was going to try to say a fancy word, synoptic gospel. Hopefully I said that right. It's not the same. They're not going through the same things. John instead talks a lot about who Jesus is, and it's very theological, and there's a lot of different things covered in John. And so we thought it'd be great, instead of just looking at a similar book, we're looking at John, but also we're going to see this idea of bearing fruit all the way through the whole gospel. You asked what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to the I am statements. Those are always really fun to talk about. People ask all the time, say, well, Jesus, didn't say he was God, and that's just not true. And so we can spend some time saying, who Jesus said he was. So I really like to get specific. The bread, he's the bread of life. It's always fun to talk about. We all like food here. It's something we can relate to.
Quite obviously. Thank you for that.
So that's exciting. What about you, Tanner? What are some reasons that we did this?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed several books, and we've got a couple I think that we're gonna cover at some point. But really, like Cabe said, we wanted to do another gospel, and there's some differences, but there's a lot of similarity between Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And John kind of gives us a different picture. His focus is very different because his audience is more universal than the other three, and I'll touch on that a little bit more as we get into the introduction here. But I think there's a lot as far as who Jesus was, and a lot that is important to know for us as we focus on bearing fruit in our lives. So that's really why we're going into that.
Yeah, I think another thing I wanted to share about it, of course, the name of this podcast being Heavy Branches comes from the theme verse in John chapter 15, verse 8, which Tanner always says at the end of every podcast, so go bear fruit and prove yourself to be one of Jesus' disciples. And so that'll be really fun to hit on, given that our name from the podcast comes from that. And then, of course, if we're going to bear fruit, what we learn from John 15 is we have to remain or abide in the vine, which is Jesus. And as we go through John, we're going to see how Jesus interacts with specific people on a very detailed level, like you think when he's interacting with Nicodemus, when he's interacting with a woman at the well. And we'll see various examples throughout John of not just what Jesus says about himself, like in the I am statements, where we learn the character of Jesus, but we also get to see really how Jesus interacts one-on-one individually with different people. And I think it's so important for us to grasp not only who Jesus is, but how Jesus lived as we prepare ourselves to remain connected to him, abiding in him to bear fruit. So I'm really excited to go through the Gospel of John with you guys.
Yeah, and we just covered that text in our Barriers to Bearing Fruit series, the John 15. But really, this is going through the whole book. It's going to be kind of an extension of the stuff we discussed in that episode. And even when we get to that text, it will be from a different approach. So it's not going. There will be some repeated information, but it's not going to be all just a repeat of what we discussed before.
And I mean, it'll be 15 weeks in the future. So if anybody remembers the details that long from now, then kudos to you. You got
Yeah, I don't know about you all, but it takes me many tries to get information down, not just once. So
That's why you have to write things down, Gabe.
yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, I don't know. Those of you that have watched the Heavy Branches podcast for some time now, I mean, this is episode 70, which is pretty crazy to think about. But those of you that have watched for a while and have seen our introduction episodes in the past, you know that so these are fairly short, just presenting some of the foundational information of the book as we go into it, and as we go through it, we'll sometimes refer back to uh, some of this information to help us understand the text better and help us understand what's going on and how it applies to us better. So that's why we do these, and so as we hop in here, Cabe already mentioned. We've talked a little bit about the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke. Um, the gospels are often referred to by who they're written to, and while Matthew, Mark, and Luke are synoptic gospels, they're also written to three different audiences. Matthew primarily is writing to a Jewish audience. Mark seems to primarily be writing to a Roman audience, and then Luke is to the Gentiles. What is so cool about John's gospel is it seems to be more of a universal gospel, um, and that doesn't mean I want to be very careful about how I say that, because universal taken out of context would mean that we think that there's multiple ways to heaven, and that's not at all what we're saying. What I mean by that is that it's written for any kind of background. And while Christianity is the exclusive path to God, the gospel is a universally offered hope to anyone, for anyone to accept. And John's gospel is anybody can read John's gospel and it be very specifically written to their background because it's more universal than the other ones.
We'll talk about this later, in episodes, but Jesus says he's, the way, the truth, and the life. He is the only way. But just because he's the only way, he's not the only way for a specific group of people, like you said. It's the only way for all people. I like the thought that the gospel, the truth about Christ, is for all people, not just.
it's kind of paradoxical, isn't it? Christianity is exclusive in the sense that it's the only way to heaven is through Jesus, but it's also inclusive because any and every person is invited to get in on the gospel. So it's in a sense it's inclusive where anyone can come and become a Christian, but it's also exclusive that Christianity is the only way to heaven and eternal life. So that's always a cool concept to think about.
Yeah, I think it was CJ Epperson that told me that Jeff Fall said something along the lines of Christianity is the most inclusively exclusive thing to ever exist. He said something along those lines, and he's right. So, and that's why that's another reason why we're excited about this. This is it's going to like Jacob Simpson said, show us how Jesus interacted with a lot of different people and how the gospel applies to everybody. And I think one of the biggest things, one of the key things with John's writing here is that he really focuses on the fact that Jesus is the Son of God. That's apparent from the very first chapter. And if there is a God that created the universe, that is the most foundational application to every human being, every creature that there is that we are created. And so it's a draw to everybody.
Before we get much deeper, I want to ask the question to you all. When reading the Bible, it's really important to know, the context. We're going to be covering that in this episode. But who was John? He wrote it. His name's on it. Do you guys have some thoughts on who he was? The person who wrote the gospel.
Well, we know he was one of Jesus's 12. He was part of the kind of the core three, if you might say, of Peter, James, and John. And you actually bring up something that I find very interesting, and I'm actually going to be preaching on this here in a couple months. But something wonderful about John's writings is the change that we see Christ caused in his life. And as we read the Gospels, James and John are referred to as the sons of thunder. We see them wanting to call down fire and brimstone at some point in the Gospels.
Kind
They
of sounds
were,
like a biker gang, doesn't it?
yeah, and
Sounds like-
they were wrathful. They sought destruction on other people. But the change that Jesus caused in John's life becomes very apparent in his writings, in all of his writings, in that he focuses a lot on love throughout his writings, and so I think that's really cool. We see the Gospels talk about who John was when he was with Jesus, but then we see how Jesus's death, resurrection changed him in what he then begins to focus on in his writings. So
I also really like that he was a fisherman. He wasn't highly educated. He worked with his hands. He was kind of rough around the edges, like you said, kind of a wrathful. I think of John kind of being the, like quick to, jump in the way kind of person. And like you said, we'll see his growth, but he wasn't highly educated. He wasn't, like Paul. He didn't have this Jewish education, just a fisherman who followed Jesus, which is really cool.
as we enter the book, I really want us to be careful, because a lot of times people just refer to the Gospel of John as like the gospel of love, and we enter a lot of people want to approach John's writing as if the only thing he's focused on is love. And really that's not even his primary focus in the book. And so I want us to be careful about that. Love is obviously extremely important, and it is something that John addresses quite often, but it's not his only point that he's trying to make, and it's not even the biggest point that he's trying to make. So, we know, to continue to talk about who John was, we know he was the last apostle to die. He probably the most widely held date for writing was 90 AD, while he was living on the island of Patmos, which means it's one of the last writings of the New Testament to be actually written.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was one of the youngest of the apostles. If after AD, it would be 90 years after Jesus, and so he had to be pretty old to be writing. Correct, when he wrote this book.
Yeah, I don't remember who said this or suggested this, and I'd have to do some extra research on this, I'll admit, but something that I was reading suggested that while Jesus was around the age of 30 when he was doing his ministry, it's possible that most of the disciples that became apostles were teenage age or like lower 20s. Which is an interesting concept to consider. But I don't have any actual proof for that, so I'd have to do more study on it. But I don't know how to answer that. I don't know if he was the youngest or one of the youngest or not.
I don't really know for sure. Dates is something that I'm not great with, but if we know he was the last apostle alive, it would make sense for him to be the youngest. But I guess then again, a lot of the apostles were martyred, so they kind of, they didn't die of old age. They were murdered, so maybe that wouldn't really matter too much. I'm not
I
sure.
just checked, and James E. Smith says that he is the youngest of the apostles chosen. We would have to do more research on that, but from Dr. Smith, he states that he was the youngest. Like you said, it would make sense, for the timing we get for the writing, for him to be that young.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, if we're talking, the years are based off of the birth of Christ, right? So if we're talking, Jesus was 30 AD and John was younger than that, then 90 AD, we're looking at anywhere from maybe 75 to 80 years old at that point.
Old, sorry.
Wow. When we invite Dick Chambers to come on here, I'm going to tell him you said that.
Yeah, you can. I might say it again.
Well, so with the different authors of the Gospels focusing on trying to connect with different audiences, we find that they focus on different things. Like Matthew tried to focus a lot on Christ's kingliness, the fact that he was from the line of David. He focused a lot on that through his gospel. Luke focuses a lot on Christ's manhood in order to relate to the Gentiles. But John really takes special time to expose Jesus's godhood, the fact that he was the Son of God. And we'll see that, as I said, from the very beginning next week when we get into chapter 1. And honestly, we might have to split that chapter up into a couple episodes because there's so much to it. But um, that's what he takes special time to do. And that, when we look at like the immediate purpose of the book, um, kind of the key verse that Dr. Smith draws from the text is John chapter 20 verse 31, and this is the most clear statement in any of the Gospels of the purpose for writing. Like, John makes it very clear, this is the reason that I wrote this down. And so verse 31 says, "But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." Go
Tanner,
ahead.
so it doesn't say, I write this so all people will know love and show love in their life. Instead, what does it say, Dan?
It says that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. That is the primary focus and purpose of the book, and that believing you may have life in his name. So it's not just the knowledge of the fact that Jesus is the Christ, but that knowledge change your life, that you may actually have life in him. So that is the focus and the mindset that we should take when approaching this book. And then Dr. Smith also brings out a greater purpose, if you might say. The ultimate purpose is kind of to include some of the information about Jesus's life that we don't find in the other Gospels, and with that, to make clear that Christ is God. John establishes the deity of Jesus. And one of the fun facts about the book play into that, and Jacob Cabe already brought this up a little bit, but one of the fun facts is that Jesus uses the phrase "I am" 93 times in this gospel. And I'm sure we'll bring this up several times, but when we look back to the Old Testament and Moses is saying, God, he's getting ready to go tell the Israelites this message from God, and Moses says, well, who do I tell them that sent me? And God says, I am who I am. And that is Jesus knew this, the Jews knew it. One time when Jesus said this, the Pharisees got so upset because they thought he was blaspheming that they picked up stones to kill him. Um, he is These I am statements are a clear proclamation of Jesus saying, I am God. And that's going to be a big deal. That is the main focus of this, as we just read, to establish that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. That's important for our salvation. That's important for developing our worldview as Christians, and then taking that out into the world to help people see the truth.
Believing that Jesus is God, I don't want to undermine what you said, Tanner. It is important, but you can take it a step farther than that. It is necessary for our
Yeah,
salvation. And
absolutely.
there is a difference between something being important for salvation and something being necessary or essential. And so you remove Jesus's divinity as God, you don't have biblical Christianity anymore. And so that's definitely something that we've got to get straight as we get going here.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can't read the gospel and go, yep, Jesus, just a guy. There's no way. You can't. He talks very clearly that he is the Son of
Isn't
God.
it so weird that, and I'm going to get off on a tangent here, but some people that are typically really smart, they like to say, well, Jesus was not God. He was just a really good teacher. That's not possible. He can't both be a good teacher and not God when he claims to be God.
He'd be a bad teacher. He'd be a
Because then
liar.
he'd be a bad teacher. And
Yeah.
if I mean, like what Tanner was talking about, where the Pharisees went to stone him, saying, "Before Abraham was, I am." He was claiming to exist before Abraham, and the Pharisees, they knew who Abraham is. You know, he's very important to the Pharisees and to the whole story of the Old Testament. And Jesus is saying, "Yeah, before Abraham ever existed, I did."
What
And
was it?
how can you say that's not a claim to be divine, to be God?
Yeah.
So that's my tangent, is that it makes me laugh when people say Jesus wasn't God, but he was a good teacher. Even though he did teach it, he was God. So really, he was wrong, but he was still a good teacher. That's just never made any sense to me. It's so annoying.
What is that quote from C.S. Lewis? Was it C.S. Lewis? Do you guys know the quote? He's either um, a
No,
lunatic.
you're thinking of the liar, lunatic, or Lord. The only conclusion you can come to about what Jesus teaches about himself is that he either has to be a liar, he has to be crazy and out of his mind, or he has to be Lord, or in other words, God.
A good teacher and a liar is not an option.
No.
It's crazy, lying, or Lord.
A good teacher and a liar is not an option. A good teacher and a lunatic is not an option. But good teacher and Lord of everything, that works.
Amen, brother. Amen.
I think some of us get close to lunacy, but we don't step over the line.
Well, you do quite often, and they're privy to it. Those that listen to this
I step
podcast.
over the line of lunacy?
Comment below if Cave has ever stepped over the line of lunacy.
Oh no. Goodness.
But I think that wraps up kind of our introduction. Just really focusing as we approach the book of John on the fact that John's primary purpose, as it says in chapter 20, verse 13, is so that we may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in His name. And I think when we combine that with our key verse, go bear fruit and so prove to be one of His disciples, um, you know, life in Christ means if we're abiding in him, as Jacob brought up earlier, then we will bear fruit. And so this is going to have the whole thing is going to have a lot of impact on us personally when it comes to bearing fruit.
Yeah, really looking forward to getting into this next week with you guys. I'm super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, close us out here, Jake, with Song of the Week.
Song of the Week is back. There's a little foreshadowing here because if I'm not mistaken, I believe I actually said this was my favorite song last episode. But Song of the Week this time is going to be West Texas Wind by Need to Breathe. I know it's not the first Need to Breathe song on Song of the Week. I'm sure it won't be the last. And I know we typically share one lyric that we really like from the song. I couldn't pick between two, so I'm going to share two of them. One of the lines goes, God, I know you can hear me, so please come near me. I'm ready to let the world go. And I really like that statement, especially at the end. I'm ready to let the world go. Just thinking about how sometimes we can have such a tight grip on the world that it impacts how closely or how well we can follow God. So that confession to him, I'm ready to let the world go, I think is really important for us to think about. And then the other line that I like is at the end. So I'm running to you like a West Texas wind, singing, God, I need you. Oh, how I need you. God, I need you again. And just all throughout the song is a constant reminder of how much we need God and how much we need to continue to come back to him and remember that daily we always need him to get by in life. And it's just a song I really enjoy. Like the instruments in it and just the sound of the song is really nice, but the lyrics are also really meaningful too, and definitely something you can sing in worship to God. So that's my song of the week this time is West Texas Wind by Need to Breathe.
I got a question. How can our listeners find our playlist of songs?
They can either look up Heavy Branches podcast songs of the week, or Jacob, I think, has posted the link on our Facebook before as well. And
yeah, it's on Spotify is the platform that it's on. It's not on Apple Music unless one of you guys have put it on there, because the three of us use Spotify, and we are very convicted that Spotify is the superior music platform and podcast platform. So we encourage you to use Spotify. No partnership yet, but we're working on that behind the scenes.
Music platform, yes. Podcast platform is debatable.
So
we'll settle this off the air. We got to get wrapping up here. But if you want to find our Songs of the Week playlist, it is on Spotify. Just look up Heavy Branches Songs of the Week, and it'll come up.
The reason I say that is because I've tried and I cannot find it myself.
Well, you tend to be a little technologically challenged, so I'll make sure I sing you a special link where you can get it.
That'd be great.
Well, I'm making a promise for Jacob Simpson right now that this week he will post the link to the playlist on the Facebook page.
Yeah, I can do that too, no problem.
And we should have some reels coming out.
That too.
Yeah, so enjoy those.
We appreciate all the support on those, and
yeah, for sure.
Just it's really encouraging to know people are listening. You know, we don't make this to try to get number one on the charts, but we don't make it for nobody to listen. So we do always appreciate the encouragement hearing when people listen, and so that's it. I think
absolutely.
We're done here.
All right. Well, we thank you guys for listening. Hopefully, you're excited for us getting into John, and we'll do chapter 1 next week. As always, go bear fruit, and so prove to be one of Jesus's disciples.